If you ride in America or across much of continental Europe, you already know the gesture. Another motorcycle comes toward you the other way, and without even thinking about it, your left hand drops off the bar and two fingers point down at the asphalt. A total stranger on a machine you have never seen before just acknowledged you, and you acknowledged them right back, and neither of you said a single word. Riders have been greeting each other on the road like this for generations, and if you ask where the tradition actually came from, almost everyone points to the same story. As the story goes, it started in 1904 with two men named William Harley and Arthur Davidson, the founders of Harley-Davidson. The two of them passed each other out riding one day, exchanged a wave, and somehow that simple greeting turned into a tradition the whole world would end up copying. It is a great story. It is printed on motorcycle blogs, repeated in magazines, sworn to by riders who have been on two wheels for 40 years. There is just one problem with it. Nobody has ever been able to produce a source. No period account, no photograph, no letter, nothing written down at the time by anyone who was there, and even Harley-Davidson's own telling of those early years never mentions a wave at all. The single most famous origin story in motorcycling is something everybody repeats and nobody can prove. So if the Harley story is only a legend, then who really started the wave? I went looking for the real answer, and the deeper I dug, the stranger it got. Because this goes a lot further than a hand signal. The 1904 date at least sounds plausible. Motorcycling was young, and Harley-Davidson itself was barely more than a backyard operation back then, building just 8 motorcycles in all of that year. But plausible is not the same as proven, and here is the first crack in the story. Motorcycling then was not some empty frontier where two founders could quietly write the rules for everyone else. Riders were already organizing. The Federation of American Motorcyclists had been founded the year before, in 1903, out of the New York Motorcycle Club, pulling together riders from clubs up and down the East Coast. And within about a decade, it counted more than 8,000 members from coast to coast, running national meets and long-distance endurance contests. But the missing paperwork is not even the biggest problem with the 1904 story. Nobody can explain how a private greeting between two friends supposedly spread to a whole country of riders who were already forming their own clubs and federations without any help from Milwaukee. The reason the Harley and Davidson version gets repeated anyway is simple. It has a brand behind it, it has a date, and it names two people you have already heard of. It feels like history, but the moment you ask it for receipts, it goes quiet. And it turns out this is not even the only origin story people tell. Spend an afternoon reading about where the wave came from, and you notice something strange. Almost every source repeats that origin, and almost every source immediately backs away from it, admitting nobody really knows. So people reach for other explanations, and there are two big ones. The first says the wave came home from war, that returning soldiers brought back the two-finger V for victory, the same sign Winston Churchill made famous, and that it drifted onto the road as a greeting between riders. The second is older and more romantic. It says the wave goes all the way back to medieval knights, who would raise the visor on their helmet with one hand when they passed another knight, showing their face to prove they meant no harm. Both of these fall apart the moment you look closely. Take the knight story. Raising a visor is usually claimed to be the ancestor of the modern military salute. But even the military does not actually buy that. The US Army and the historians at the Metropolitan Museum of Art both say the true origin of the salute is uncertain, and both dismiss the raised visor tale as a romantic legend with almost no evidence behind it. The oldest hard record is far less cinematic, a British order from 1745 telling soldiers to stop pulling their hats off to officers and simply touch them instead. So the knight theory tries to explain one mystery gesture by pointing at another gesture whose origin is also a mystery. And the victory sign story has the same weakness as the Harley one. It sounds neat, it links two famous things, and nobody can show you the moment it actually happened. It feels true mostly because we want it to be true. That is the pattern here. Every clean, quotable origin we reach for, the founders, the soldiers, the knights, turns out to be a good story wearing the costume of a fact. Which raises an uncomfortable question. What if there is no fourth story with better paperwork waiting underneath? There isn't. I went looking for the person who invented the biker wave, and the honest answer is that there probably is not one we can name. The origin is not hidden somewhere waiting to be found. It is simply lost. Customs like this rarely come with a birth certificate. They start as something a handful of people do, and if enough others copy it, it quietly hardens into a rule nobody remembers making. But something real is documented, and it is the part that actually matters. Long before anyone was arguing about 1904, motorcyclists were doing one thing over and over. They were finding each other. That federation, from 1903, grew into thousands of riders. When it faded after the First World War, the American Motorcyclist Association rose up to replace it in 1924, already carrying something like 10,000 members. Clubs, group runs, organized rallies, cross-country endurance records, all of it existed for decades before the wave supposedly went mainstream. By the time the first veterans rolled home from the Second World War, American riders had already spent more than 40 years forming clubs, running together, and treating the open road as shared territory. And then came the war. When the Second World War ended, a generation of young American veterans came home changed. They had spent years around machinery, around danger, around tight-knit units, and a lot of them came back hungry for that feeling again. Harley-Davidson alone had built more than 90,000 motorcycles for the war effort, and when it ended, thousands of those surplus machines hit the civilian market cheap. Those men and those bikes reshaped American biker culture, especially the loud, tribal, club-centered world that would define the public image of motorcycling for decades. Did those veterans invent the wave? There is no evidence that they did, and it would be dishonest to tell you otherwise. But they are the perfect example of the thing that really explains it. The wave never needed an inventor. It just needed a community close-knit enough that lifting a hand to a stranger on the same kind of machine felt obvious. It is tempting to picture a soldier's instinct to acknowledge his own side turning into a rider's two fingers on the highway, and maybe it did, but that is a guess, not a documented origin. What is not a guess is that riders had been building exactly that kind of community since before the First World War. You can even see that leaderless, evolved quality in the gesture itself, because the way riders do it was never designed by anybody. It just solved problems one at a time. In America and most of continental Europe, the classic version uses the left hand for a very practical reason. The right hand is busy on the throttle and the front brake, so the left is the one that is free. But cross into a country that drives on the left, like Britain, and it changes completely. There, the hand nearest an oncoming rider is the throttle hand, so instead of waving, British riders will usually just give a nod. If you're enjoying this, take a second to subscribe. I dig into the stories behind motorcycle culture every week, and there are far more of them than you would think. Now, why keep the wave low instead of high? That one is less deep than people make it sound. A low hand is easy to drop without lifting your arm up into the wind. It keeps you close to the controls, and over the years, it simply became the recognizable shape of the thing. As for the two fingers, plenty of riders today read them as keep two wheels on the ground, a small wish that the other person makes it home safe. Whether that meaning came first or got attached later, nobody can say. Some riders wave with an open hand, some point a single finger, some just tip their head, and in parts of Europe, riders will stick out a leg instead. No committee ever standardized any of it, which is exactly what you would expect from a custom nobody actually invented. For the first half of the 20th century, all of this lived in a fairly small world. Motorcyclists were a minority, often treated as outsiders or troublemakers. After a rowdy 1947 rally in Hollister, California, and the Hollywood biker movie it helped inspire, the public picture of an American motorcyclist had hardened into a leather-clad outlaw looking for a fight. Then in the early 1960s, one company blew the doors wide open. By the end of 1962, American Honda was already selling more than 40,000 motorcycles a year through nearly 750 dealers, more than any competitor in the country, most of them the cheerful little step-through Honda 50. Those numbers ran so far past expectations that Honda set an almost ridiculous goal for the next year, 200,000 bikes. And to hit it, the company launched the advertising campaign that would become legendary. You meet the nicest people on a Honda. The campaign, built by the agency Gray Advertising, threw out that outlaw image completely. Its ads showed students, parents, young couples, ordinary families riding on a sunny afternoon, and one of the most famous of them even put Santa Claus on a Honda. Almost overnight, a motorcycle started to look less like a symbol of rebellion and more like something you might park in a suburban driveway. It worked on a scale nobody had imagined. By 1970, Honda was selling 500,000 motorcycles a year in America alone. Now, Honda did not invent the Wave, and there is no evidence it made the gesture spread, but it did something quieter and just as important. It enormously enlarged the community the Wave lived in. When you go from a few thousand riders scattered across the country to hundreds of thousands of ordinary people on bikes, any little in-group signal suddenly has a far bigger crowd to travel through. Nobody can prove Honda is what made the Wave standard. But it is hard to picture the modern riding world, the Wave included, without that boom. And here is the detail that should have ended this whole debate a long time ago. Motorcyclists are not the only people who do this. Jeep owners wave at each other so faithfully that Jeep eventually turned it into an official owner program. Miata drivers flash their headlights. Corvette owners, classic Volkswagen owners, and plenty of others have their own versions. None of that tells you how the biker wave began, but it tells you something better. Communities built around a distinctive machine keep inventing these small signals of recognition on their own, with nobody in charge and no first person to credit. It is simply what people do when they share something that sets them apart from everyone else on the road. So the next time someone tells you the biker wave started in 1904 with two men from Milwaukee, you will know the real story. Nobody can name who started it, because there almost certainly was not a single someone. Not Harley, not the soldiers, not the knights. What the record actually shows is riders organizing into clubs and federations generations ago, a veteran generation that made the culture tighter and louder, and a Honda boom that made it enormous. Somewhere across all of that, acknowledging another rider quietly became just what you do. And these days, some riders will tell you it is fading. Ask around and you will hear the grumbling. Cruiser riders and sport bike riders snubbing each other, longtime riders who say that on a crowded modern road, with more bikes out there than ever, they have stopped bothering to wave at everyone. And the crowd itself has changed. The average American rider is far older than a generation ago, with the median age of a motorcycle owner passing 50 by 2018, up from around 30 at the start of the 1990s. At least one magazine has run an outright keep the biker wave alive plea. Whether the tradition is truly disappearing, or whether riders have complained about exactly this for as long as there have been riders, is honestly impossible to prove. But here is what I would hold on to. This is a habit with no inventor and no birthday, invented by everyone and no one, shaped by a century of riders who just wanted a quick way to say, "I see you" to a stranger on the same machine. It costs you nothing. So the next time a bike comes toward you the other way, drop 2 fingers toward the road. You might be the reason it lasts.